Two.
All right. Well, good evening, everybody. I'm Chris Harold. I'm a camping director for our Cascade Pacific Council. And with me is our marketing director, Chris Bartell, and he's got all the buttons and gizmos to keep things running smooth tonight. And I've got what I hope is the information you're looking for to get ready for camp this summer. It's exciting. How many days, Chris?
Let's see here, 69 days. We have what did I just say here? 69 days, 5 hours, 2 minutes, and 42 seconds.
Which, I mean, that seems like a lot of days, but they go by so quickly. And so anyway, with tonight, just know that tonight's meeting is being recorded and that you can put your questions throughout the evening into the Q&A portion of the Zoom, not the chat box. The chat box is disabled. So that's that part. And just a little bit of background on tonight's meeting. Tonight's meeting is things about all camps, things that apply to all camps. The more the big picture and some of the things, how do you prepare to bring your kids to camp and your scouts to camp? And then the second part is the gory details about when is basketry merit badge and the gory details. But even before that, you'll see that we've got a lot of that information available at your fingertips. So thank you for making time. I think probably one of the most important things that I say tonight is that thank you for being the leader that you are and preparing your troops and your Cub packs to come to camp this summer. If it weren't for you, we would not be able to deliver these experiences, these mountaintop, literally in some cases, experiences to our youth. And it's such a privilege that we have to work together to make this happen. Unlike many youth organizations, Scouting uses adult leadership at camp. And I really have to say that that is one of the most significant things, because they're coming to camp with adults who they know and trust, and you know them and can support them. And for so many reasons, that's important. And the other piece of that puzzle is in recent years, we've seen such an uptick in mental health issues for children. And being around adults who care about you is one of the biggest safeguards we've got against that becoming more of an issue. And so we're grateful. We are very grateful. And I say that as a former Cub leader and Scout leader and in my son's packs and troops, and just grateful for you. So it's important we start right there. Tonight, we've got a lot of things. How do you get information? What about the fees? When are those due? What about refunds if those are necessary? How do we take care of any special needs for our kids? Medical forms. There are details you need to know about that, whether it's a Cub camp or a Scouts BSA camp, and it's a slight difference with medical forms between the two. Youth protection. How do we keep our kids safe while they're at camp? And then health and safety things. There's a couple other details. There's, I think, a slide on rules in there as well. And then certainly lots and lots of time for questions. So I think we should just jump right in. All right, so potentially the biggest thing you take away tonight is this website, cpcbsa.org/camp portals, because those you can see the page on the left side of the screen there. And if you click on your camp, it will take you to a lot of the information I'm sharing tonight, but also the more specific things about what makes your camp special. And things you need to know about your camp's schedule and arrival times and campsite assignments. Though some of the arrival times and campsite assignments get handled a little closer to camp. So there's that. Secondly, you get information about camp fees, like where are we at with our camp fees, and what about if we need to change our registration? How many youth are coming? How many adults are coming? And any questions you have about those at the email address on the screen there, 492.camping@scouting.org. And thirdly, the thing I mentioned at the top there, on May 31st, the camp specific webinars will be coming, where you get to meet the camp directors and some of their key staff, and they'll help you walk through what your experience at camp will be like. In addition, I want to share that I get to work with our camp managers and help recruit and train and prepare them for camp. And they have all agreed that something that we tried that worked really well was that each week during camp, they will be hosting a similar webinar because sometimes, I mean, if you learn something at the end of May and your camp week is August, first week of August, there's a little time to do some for slippage there. And so there's some opportunity for you to check in with camp on the regular as it approaches. And you'll find the links to those camp specific webinars on the camp portals. I'm not sure that all those links are there now, but they will be shortly. And certainly before the before the May 31st meeting time. So those are just some key dates and upcoming things.
I'm going to have you share your screen, actually, then you can drive. How's that sound?
Oh, I'm sorry. Am I not doing that?
It's all good. See, we're a little rusty, gang. Thanks for your patience. Like I said earlier, we were doing this every week, and now we've slowed down doing our webinars. So
thank you, Chris. Can you okay, so it's not allowing me to share my screen right now because I think I made you the host.
Okay, give me a second. Stand by here. There we go.
Technical difficulties, please stand by. There we go. Is that working?
Yep, you're good.
All right, we are on to fees, and this is, hang tight with me for just a second here. It's just pay special attention on this slide to whether you are coming with a Cub pack or with a Scout troop. For Cub packs, there's an important payment date coming soon, May 1st. It's $100 per Cub is due May 1st. Now, you've likely already put down the $10 per Cub deposit, so it would be an additional $90 on top of that to make for a total of $100 that's due on May 1st. And that way, it just firms up our numbers. It's also, that's also the time if you have a change in how many Cubs you're planning on bringing to camp, you will want to adjust those numbers at that time, because you don't want to put $100 for Cubs who aren't going to be there. So it's crucial to do that, because also there are Cubs waiting to come in. So May 1st is a key date. So when those payments come in, it allows us to help the Cubs on the wait list move into camp. So that's pretty great to be able to do that, to make sure every Cub who wants to gets to come to camp. And then you'll notice the key on June 1st, there's a full payment bonus. That's for Cub Scouts, and that date for Scouts BSA is May 1st. And that is if your fees for each Scout who's registered for camp is paid in full by that date, each Scout, each Cub in your group receives a bonus. Essentially, it's a $5 coupon to use at the trading post for whatever they want. And it's to be distributed to each Cub or each Scout to use in the trading post. And it's a thank you for paying on time and early. It helps us prepare. It helps ensure that you're prepared with your groups, and gives you a little bit of an extra lever with your pack and troop to make sure that that's all squared away before everybody's stuffing things in their backpacks. Regardless of those other dates, everybody needs to be paid 2 weeks before camp, and that way you show up at camp without wondering who's paid, who's unpaid, all that sort of thing. If you have rare exceptions to that, please make sure to communicate with us. We're a pretty understanding bunch, and we're happy to help work through special situations by and large. You'll see the refund information coming up shortly. A quick note to this, I'm seeing a couple of questions about fees specifically, and we're on that slide. So I'll spin out of my pattern for just a moment. So adult fees for Cub Scouts, any adult fees, Cub Scouts or Boy Scouts, really are not due until you get to camp. That doesn't say that here, but because it's so much easier to pay them in advance. And then the fees are collected either by the pack or by the troop, and then paid in that Tentaroo program, that Tentaroo software, to the council. So a troop pays to bring their troop to camp, a pack pays to bring the pack to camp. So the parents pay the pack or the troop. Great. And then the incentives, I see your question about that. I don't want to get to, but it's good, because repeating the incentives is essentially a $5 coupon that can be used in the trading post for anything in the trading post that they want. And so those certificates, coupons are handed, scout bucks, whatever you call them, are given to the scouts to use in the trading post for what they can use it toward: t-shirt, hat, candy, whatever floats their boat. It's just a recognition of thank you for paying on time, and even a little early. All right, moving on from that for a moment, and remember there will be lots of time for questions at the end. Here's a little bit more on adult fees. Unlike youth fees, the adult fees are fully refundable. Our capacity is based on the youth that are signed up for camp. And so if adults need to change their plans at the very end, that it can work out. And so adults hopefully are paying before camp, but at camp is also okay. Again, plans sometimes change. For Cub Scouts, there's an incentive of how many free adults you can get, and you can see that on the table there, up to 3 free adults with your pack, depending on how many you're bringing. And then for Scouts BSA, for all troops, it's 1 free adult that is able to come to camp, and then additional paid adults. All right. Refunds. So part of the refund game is, for a long time, there was a history of troops and packs registering, just picking a number, registering, and showing up at camp with far fewer kids. And ultimately, it meant that fewer kids got to come to camp, because let's say you have 20 kids on your reservation and 10, you show up with 10, well, there could be 10 kids on the waiting list, 10 scouts on the waiting list who don't get to go to camp with their pack or troop because those spots were held. We don't want to overfill the camps. And so we've gotten tougher with refunds. I'll be quite honest about that, just to make sure that we are reserving the spots that we have and every scout gets to come to camp. So if you have fewer youth coming, and I know that one of the biggest challenges of this is that we know Webelos are crossing over, and we want to get that number dialed in just as soon as absolutely possible, so that it's the correct number. The reservations are correct. So if you're decreasing the youth number in your pack or troop, you can receive in refund $100 per scout if you're doing that more than 2 weeks before camp. Okay, and then if it's less than 2 weeks before camp, no refund for that. There are the rare exceptions. Somebody in the family dies. The scout is ill. We don't want 6 scouts coming to camp, or adults for that matter, or the family just, up and moved. There's been a job change or something. There is the refund request form on the camp portal. And so we want to make sure all those refund requests are handled on or before arriving at camp. So as you arrive at camp and do your check-in, that would be part of the drill there. But before camp is even better. When there's a refund coming from the camp fees, just like when you pay the camp fees from the pack or the troop, the refund goes to the pack or the troop committee chair for any kind of return that is needed there. And the check is made out to the pack or the troop. And it says that we're done with the checks by September 1st if they're approved for refund checks. But we've been a lot better than that lately. We put September 1st to give ourselves a little bit of grace in processing, particularly with some of the camps not ending till August 15th. There's that. Special needs. Scouts come to camp every year with special needs, and adults too. Lots of different kinds of special needs. Letting camp know ahead of time helps us prepare and helps us communicate back and forth. How can we help? And in some cases, how are we stuck and need some additional help? How can we work out any challenges that may arise there? You'll want to complete the special needs form on the camp portal pages at least 2 weeks before camp. That gives camps time to respond, to ask follow-up questions, and that sort of thing. And then last minute requests can be very problematic because we order the food, for example, well ahead, and we assign the campsites a week or two ahead of camp. So think of a mobility need that happens, and we've assigned all the campsites. Now you're shuffling 18 troops or 18 packs around between the campsites. it is a math equation that my calculus teacher would be proud of, how we work to assign everybody to the campsite that they would like to go to if possible, and then the one that they need to go to if necessary. So there's that. Let's see. Special needs and med forms. Okay. Like the due date page, pay special attention on this slide to which things are related to Scouts BSA and which things are related to Cubs. So let's start with what applies to everybody. Every overnight camper must have a current BSA medical form. And that means that if they're under 18, that there's a parent signature space for that. There is a fillable PDF form online that the parents can type in all the details and print and get all the signatures for. Now, if that's for Scouts BSA, our Scouts BSA camps are longer than 72 hours. And so part C of that medical form must be complete and must have the physician's signature. In addition, the Scout and the adult, well, the Scout needs to be registered with the BSA. The adult, if the adults are staying over 72 hours, need to be registered with the BSA. Cubs, they just need parts A and B, and that require a parent signature. It's a medical background. The parts A and B are just anything that would be necessary and helpful should there be any kind of a camp emergency, any kind of medications that they're taking, any kind of, you would recognize special needs there. Camp is a rotten time to decide that we should stop doing a certain medication or not disclose some of the challenges we might run into there. We want to be able to support you well, and flying blind is not a good way for that. So we're very respectful of that information and keep it secure. However, it's really important to disclose everything that's going on with our Scouts and leaders that are at camp with us, so that we can be helpful when it's needed. The council office does not need your medical forms. They don't have any use for them. You won't have a medical emergency while if you have a medical emergency at camp, it doesn't help to have it at the office. You'll want to bring photocopies to camp. Really, I've seen really organized packs and troops bring those things in a binder, the photocopies of each child and adult's medical in a binder, and simply hand the binder over when they arrive at camp. That will be the first thing on exiting your car that you'll be asked for is what's the deal with how your medical forms are. They all ship shape. Also, it can take time to get scheduled for these medicals that are signed by a physician. So please make sure to remind your Scouts to make those appointments now. They're good for a year. The medicals are good for 1 year. So they need to be renewed. If it's a physician signature one, that doctor's visit needs to be within 1 year of coming to camp. And then the second piece of that is if it's the parent one, don't use last year's form, complete the new one so that it's updated and current. Kids change quick. We want to know what's going on with them. You will notice a height and weight chart on the medical form. The high adventure activities, think of, there's like the multiple day high adventure hikes out of Camp Pioneer. That would be an example where that height and weight chart would come into play. That we'll want to make sure that everybody is healthy enough to do the trips, healthy enough according to scouting standards. And where would you find all these things, these rules, and also the forms? dpcbsa.org/camp portals. All right. Medication. When you come to camp, one of the early things I mentioned is the med form. In addition, it's the medications that are on site. We need to know what those are and who has them, and that they're in good, safe hands. Notice the second part there, the bolded, if you're under age 18, all the medication needs to be in locked storage, either in the campsite or in the health lodge. Typically at our Cub camps, those are held in the in our Cub camp in Butte Creek Scout Ranch. The medication is held in the med lodge under lock and key, and then when it's needed to be taken, the leader brings the Cubs down to the med lodge for that, so that it can all be logged properly. Of course, that wouldn't be the case if you don't want an inhaler or an EpiPen in those situations locked away when they're necessary for an asthma attack, say, or a bee sting. You want those handy. It's important that the meds come in their original container, because that ensures that it is what it says, what it is. It says how often it's supposed to be taken, all that sort of thing. We have seen them. You'll see on the next slide some of the ways we've seen medicines arrive at camp, but they must come in the original pharmacy container for a medication. And I know quite a few people who generally take their pills by putting their dosage out into Monday, Tuesday, Wednesday bin, and that's great at home, but at camp it has to be in the originals. Each camp has a camp medic, and so we want the camp medic and the unit adult both to be clear on what's the proper medication and dosage and times of dispensing. Whoops. There we go. The unit leader is in charge of logging the medication as it's taken, and that making sure that they're received by our scouts as prescribed. And at the end of the session, you simply turn in that med log to the camp medic. And they trade you, typically they'll trade you the med log for that binder of medical forms back to you, so you have those back at the end of your session. Some medicines need refrigeration, and we have that. And then over age 18, you may keep your medication in the campsite lockbox. The key is the lockbox, because it's important that our medicines are locked away so they don't get accidentally dispensed. A quick note, I should have mentioned a little bit earlier there, in our Scouts BSA camps, those medicines, there is a locking box in each campsite, and you'll be given the key to that lockbox. Typically, troops will have an adult who's in charge of, well, of course it's going to be an adult, but we'll designate one adult to be in charge of, okay, I'm going to be in charge of dispensing the medicine and logging the medicine. Fewer hands in the medicine box is a good thing. Here's that example page of things we don't want. You can imagine the confusion of what is this pill and what does it do and when is it taken, and when all those sorts of things when they're not clearly labeled. Youth protection is another issue about coming to camp, and we do recommend that Cub packs and Scout troops, you can make it a stricter requirement than what the rules are. You can require that all your adults coming to camp take youth protection training. It's great because then everybody's on the same page of how Scouting is working hard to protect the youth, and we can work together better to make sure that those rules are being followed. But for sure, if an adult is staying more than 72 hours, that's part of your BSA registration, is that you have that youth protection. It is important. Well, we'll come back later to the stuff that's printed out and handled. And note that each unit should have 2 deep leadership. Sometimes at Cub Camp, there's a bit of a struggle for that, to have 2 leaders. And there are times where we can combine groups that are coming in that situation. But we definitely follow all the youth protection standards in our camps. Note in the table that parent and children may share a sleeping space in Cubs Scouts, but not in Scouts BSA. That in both Cubs and Scouts BSA, that there cannot be more than 2 years between the children who are sharing a sleeping space. And also note on our showering areas that all our camps, almost all our camps, have single stall shower, toilet, sink areas. So you go in as an individual and you can lock the door behind you. So it doesn't matter if you know, your boy, girl, adult, youth, whatever, one person goes in, locks the door behind them and has shower, toilet, and sink space, a nice showering area in our recently renovated showers. The exception would be at Camp Pioneer, there are designated sections of the shower house for age and gender. Male and female youth leaders. So in Cubs, note that the youth sleep separate. If you have like a brother and a sister in your cub pack coming together to camp, that they sleep separately, even if they're within the 2 years. That is just a rule that we enforce. The exception to that is that if you are a parent and you have your son and your daughter with you, both the family can sleep together in a tent. I know it's a lot of rules related to this, and I hope I'm not causing too much confusion by that. But that's important. We want, if we have both male and female youth in camp, for there to be both male and female leaders of those youth, so they have somebody who they can relate to in that as well. Note with the Scouts BSA, if you're bringing male and female Scouts BSA, 2 things. One, it requires 2 separate reservations, one for the boy troop, one for the girl troop. And then you also need female leaders if you have female Scouts in your troop. That's a requirement. Okay, lots of things there. More about health and safety. We work very hard each and every year to make sure our health and safety things are up to standard. I received a couple of emails over the weekend about some suggested improvements and those sorts of things based on recent events or things that were observed as our camps are inspected. We have everything from water testing to renewed emergency procedures, to inspections, to specifically look for, where are like nails sticking out as weather comes through camp. We have medical protocols that are renewed every year by a physician. Our council physician reviews and says, do we need anything different? Have we had incidents that require adjustments? And those medical protocols are updated. The accreditation program, I will just tell you, many camps have accreditation that happens every, I think it's 5 years that it's renewed. In our case, it's every year. Every year, do we have the things in place? Do our staff have the proper training? Is the facility up to snuff? All those sorts of things, and people who check for them individually. Everything from, did we check the temperature in the walk-ins on the regular basis, and are we logging that? To, are we logging all the visits to the health officer? To, do we have letters of agreement with all our emergency services? There's a lot that goes into making sure camp is happening and it's as safe as possible. We do risky things at camp, so we want it to be safe. We want to be prepared for when things maybe don't quite go the way we intend. Good. So when you arrive at camp, one of the first things is the medical screening. As an adult leader, you can do yourself a favor by doing a pre-screening of your youth and making sure that all the parents in your troop and your pack know, don't send your kids sick. Don't send your kids sick. Because typically that ends up where a child ends up going home. Being sick at camp is one of the worst experiences. Hand washing and cleanliness. I just want to underscore this for a second. We put a new emphasis on hand washing and cleanliness. Now, a Scout is clean is one of our main points of the Scout law, but we put a new emphasis on it. It was partly COVID related because we were, we were required to be more vigilant on that. But I want to note that the cases of illnesses related to not hand washing were just incredibly reduced, so rare, because we enforced it more. I would ask that we be especially vigilant about that, especially around meal times, and just make it so that our kids have clean, that our Scouts are clean. So there's that. Our staff are well trained. We are required to have over 50% of our staff trained in CPR and first aid and AED use, and that we hope that we never have to use it, but there is that training in place as well. And we train them in what our procedures are so that when something goes wrong, they can helpfully direct how to get help. I just want to enforce that when somebody becomes sick at camp, that happens, that we report it. When there's an injury, that we report it. And when there's an incident, we report it right then. Our teams have great responses, abilities to respond. So when there are health issues at camp, we can assess those well and respond appropriately. Most often camp med lodges are set up for the first response, followed by, if it's beyond the ability to deal with it well at camp, to get people with more tools and more experience on site rapidly. So that rapid reporting is important. And I know several of our emergency services said they love coming out to our camps in general, but they don't mind coming out. So it's not a problem if they roll to camp and find out, okay, it wasn't something we need to haul somebody away or anything, but they don't mind coming out. They're there to help as needed and help us assess as well. All right. I want to speak to communicating at camp. At camp, we realized as we were building this that we had a kind of an old phrase in there. We had a phone tree listed to help troops and packs get information out, and recognize that, it's not so much that you have a phone tree, it's your pack, your troop has a plan to inform people when there's an emergency. But not only that, that maybe take a time at some point during camp to shoot a pack-wide email about, here's a couple pictures and here's some of the fun we're having, or a text to all the parents that says, here's what's going on. When there is an emergency, having a single person spearhead it is kind of the point of that, so that the correct information is coming from one parent. In emergencies, there's a strong tendency for rumors to get going, a strong tendency for that. And we try to safeguard about that by being transparent and by also having this plan in place ahead of time, so that your pack or your troop knows that when they get an email or a text or whatever your designated form is from the scoutmaster or the cub master or whoever the designated person is, that's going to be reliable information. That's a big key, because there have been times where we've had emergencies in camp for sure. And the rumors that go around the horn, that telephone game is no joke. It can be problematic. So you come into camp with a plan for that is nice. It's helpful. And it doesn't all have to be emergencies. Communicate the good stuff too that's going on at camp. Sometimes emergencies happen at home while a scout is at camp, or while adult leaders are at camp. We want to be able to help you catch your scouts when there's a problem. I suspect you probably want to know too, if there's a problem at home that your scouts need to know about. So helping your parents know to contact you, and you communicating with us that there's this thing going on for one of your scouts at their home. It's important, because sometimes kids at camp will get that weird blip of cell service and have the phone working that they're not supposed to be using during camp, and be all dejected and blue or having problems because of some text that came in while they were there, or some email or whatever it is, form of communication. So making sure the parents at home know how to communicate emergencies is important. All hours, after hours, we have an answering service in place for emergencies only, that just by calling our regular council service center phone number, so that will rapidly get communicated to camp. I'm one of the people on that hotline, ready to drop everything with my phone on 24/7 during the camping season, to be able to drop everything, wake up and get to camp, to help out and to communicate to camp as well. Okay. Note that our internet has improved over years, but it is not yet. Well, camp's not about internet and cell use primarily, of course. It's a spotty service at best. We don't have internet cafes at camp. The internet that we have for adult leaders only is built for quick check-ins. And I know some people have to check in with their work sometimes, and so that's an okay thing to do, of course. You see the camp business manager when you arrive. The business manager will want to see you anyway, and that person can help you get connected, your adults to get connected. But please don't give the camp Wi-Fi passwords out to our youth members. make sure you set those expectations with your pack and troop members, and monitor whether and how they're using it, so that you don't have surprises coming out of your youth as the camp goes along. All right. The day you arrive at camp, well, ahead of the day of arriving at camp is one of the most exciting ones. But before you arrive, you'll get a call from the camp to confirm the details of your reservation, to answer your questions about camp. And the other option to that is the weekly webinars, where you can make sure your questions get answered there too. And your camp will be logging who came to the weekly webinars, so that they'll know, okay, wait, this troop already knows what site they're in, and that got questions answered about special needs and all that sort of thing. So that we'll know, we want to make sure we have that pre-camp communication. Another thing about arriving at camp, sometimes our troops are coming from more than 250 miles away. We have troops coming from Texas and Colorado and Southern California and all over the place. And in that instance, it can be tricky with flights and buses and planes, trains, and automobiles to plan for the arrival. So it is okay to arrive at camp early if and only if it's prearranged. So you'll want to arrange that with your camp director, and it does cost a little bit extra to come in and use the site and get settled in. That's used to pay our camp staff who are working on their time off. Essentially, generally our camp staff have 24 hours off during the week, where they get to go to town and grab some pizza and hang out and not be a staff member for a few minutes. And in those instances, if somebody's coming in and spending a little extra time, we want to make sure we recognize them for that. We do scheduled arrivals at camp. We schedule your arrival time at camp. For a long time, we had everybody arrive all at once, and it was a big pandemonium scene, and it was fun, but not super effective. So by scheduling arrivals, we can spread out the lines so that you're not standing around for the whole first afternoon in lines to take a swim test, or you still get oriented to camp. You still get a nice tour of camp and where are things and how do we get there and how do we, what's the actual visual of how does this camp look and how does it work? But the scheduling spreads people out, so it's a much more personal arrival. And then you'll learn about your arrival time a little bit ahead of time, a few weeks ahead of time, and then also by communicating with your camp leader. When you arrive at camp, there's better checklists on the camp portals, but this is just the main things that you need when you arrive. Those med forms I mentioned. I want to notice two rosters here. There's a roster of who is actually at camp, which adults and which youth. You've got adults arriving on Wednesday and staying through Friday, and you're there all week. You'll want to have those adults on your roster as well. So when the adult arrives on Wednesday and shows up at the business office, they'll say, "Yep, we know you're coming. That's great. Thanks very much." And then so that's one roster, that listing of who's actually at camp throughout your time there. And then the second one would be the youth and adult list from your council, the printed list of everybody who's in your troop or pack, partly because that shows youth protection training and whether it's current or not. And then partly because it's important that every person, each youth person who's at camp is registered, and that the adults who are saying here, "Yep, we're the adult leaders," are also registered in scouting, not just for camp, but with the BSA. It's a good idea. Usually we don't need it because we do have access to it too, but it's a good idea to bring that invoice saying, we are fully paid. Here's the people who are getting scholarships. Here's how many youth and how many adults we've paid for. And that just helps speed along the process. We also have copies, but it's important, I think, to just have that happen. By you printing it out, you're seeing it with your own eyes. They go, "Oh yeah, we are paid. We're good to go." It's a nice reassurance. Your gear getting brought into camp, typically at Butte Creek Scout Ranch, and I'm getting a little bit too into the specifics. So if you're going to Cub Camp, there's a little more help getting your gear into camp. It's loaded into trailers that get dropped off at your campsite. That's one of the first things there. And then if you're in Scouts BSA, the Scouts should plan on packing their gear into the campsite. Don't be the overpackers. The Scouts should plan, and adults should plan on hiking their gear to their campsite, and a vehicle from each troop in that case can drive to camp. So notice the Cub camps will bring your stuff in. The Cub camp, Butte Creek, will bring your stuff in, and then the Scouts BSA camp and Base Camp Baldwin, people hike their gear in, and then one vehicle can bring like troop gear into the campsite. Note that there are not, for the Scouts BSA, with very few exceptions, there are no merit badge or activity signups before you arrive at camp. And that's because we're flexible enough to adjust to those who want to take the different classes at different times. Camp is about so much more besides merit badges, but we are flexible to be able to meet the needs of our Scouts in taking merit badges. Your camp, at the camp specific meetings, they'll tell you all about which ones have limits, which ones have a lottery, and that sort of thing. And I think most of that information is already up on the camp portal for your camp. Okay. Whew, busy. There's a lot of stuff. So I'm glad we're taking time. I'm glad you're taking time to hear it now. It's still time, 69 days plus. So, okay. Note that the rules of camp, this list of rules is not comprehensive. This is not everything, but this is the main things. Just like we tell our Scouts, the Scout oath and law are the law of camp. That's the law. We tell our staff that as well. The Scouter's Code of Conduct is a document you should be familiar with, just in general, but also in the context of make sure any adults you're bringing to camp are clear on what that Scouter's Code of Conduct is, because some of the things that are on there may not be obvious to every day. I'm a parent who's never been to camp before, sort of situations. Right, so it's helpful to share that with every parent coming to camp. We're there to live out the Scout oath and law and to be great models for our Scouts. And those two things take care of 99.9% of everything that we encounter at camp. And then the other 1% are, okay, thou shalt nots. So make sure you don't bring fireworks, firearms, don't bring them, just don't. Drugs, same thing. I know in Oregon, marijuana is legal. However, at camp it is, don't bring it. It's not allowed. It's our standard. Alcohol, same way. And tobacco, a clear distinction there. For those who use tobacco, it's in scouting, it's never to be around the kids, but there are designated places at camp for tobacco use, any kind of tobacco that is out of view of our Scouts. Okay. That's the key things there. And then I want to highlight a change that's coming after camp is over this summer, but I want you to know, because you're an adult leader who cares about these things, every adult on all Scout BSA overnight outings has to be registered starting this September. And we learned this from the national organization a couple weeks ago, actually. And so there's time still to make sure that happens. But as you're planning for fall, that's an important change that's coming down the line. For Cub Scouts, it's the rules I don't believe have changed. The overnighters still have limits of you need to camp in an approved camping location, and that the proper leaders have to be registered and present for you to do an overnight outing with Cubs. So that's kind of a little bit off of the summer camp topic, but I want you to know it's coming because it's a big enough change that it's important for you to know. Okay, guess what? We're at the question part. Remember, most of them can be answered at the cpcbsa.org camp portals, and then many others can be addressed. Specific questions about specific situations, that sort of thing. 492.camping@scouting.org is the best place to send that. Okay, so I think, Chris, I've seen a flood of questions coming in, yes. And I want to be helpful to that. Do you want to?
I'll ask you the questions here. I'll try and go in some semblance of an order. We'll start with kind of the beginnings before camp. Who actually gets the call before camp to confirm our details?
Great. So whoever registered in Tentaroo gets the call. Whoever is the main person on the registration on Tentaroo, whoever made that registration. Now, sometimes the person who did the job last year and registered is still the person listed there. So you'll want to make sure to get logged in and get that changed, or to email that 492.camping address on the screen and confirm that the person that you want to get the call is the person on your reservation to get the call.
Great. And speaking of before camp, can you repeat the incentives for scouts paid by May 1st, please?
Yes, for Scouts BSA, if you pay by May 1st, it's a $5 certificate coupon to be for each scout, not the leaders, but for each scout for the trading post. And that date is different for the Cubs. If your Cub pack is paid in full by June 1st, then that works for your Cub pack.
Great. Let's answer a couple of medical questions here. Let's see. Do the units need to fill out one special needs form per group?
Per person. And the parents can do that form if you'd like. The parents can do that form by using the link on the camp portals. And I think we can pop that into the chat, into the webinar chat as well, I believe. The special needs link.
Sure, I can grab that in a moment here.
Yeah, we want to know the particulars of those special needs for sure, and then have enough time to be responsive to it. And the parent's probably the best person to convey that to us.
And how many copies of the med forms does my pack or troop need to bring? Is it one per unit, one for camp staff? What do you recommend?
Each person in camp has a completed med form, and so. But what we recommend is that you bring photocopies of those instead of the original, because sometimes packs and troops forget to pick up their forms, and it's not that we don't mail them back or anything like that, but you don't have to look for, if you got the main copy at home, you don't have to worry about it. Like, oh shoot, we forgot them, but you have that copy. It's difficult to get that appointment with the physician sometimes, and to get the signature, you don't want to have to recreate that.
Great. And let's see here. Speaking of medical forms and such, does the medication form only apply to minors?
I believe all medication needs to be logged.
And does that include over the counter?
I don't believe so for adults. For youth, I think yes.
Okay. And does the camp provide the medical log? And I actually just put in the chat there, gang. You should be able to actually open the chat and see it, see the links here in the chat. And so I put a link there to the MedForm page on from National, from the Boy Scouts of America there. Let's see here. If you're over 18, do you mean adult parents attending keep their medication in a lockbox? So do adults need to keep it in a lockbox, or can they keep it on their person?
In a lockbox.
Great. And like Chris mentioned earlier, there are lockboxes that come with at the campsites. And let's see. I think that's it from a medical perspective. Oh, good to emphasize, they actually do need to be in the original pill containers. That's a really great thing to re-emphasize, gang, just so we know it is the real thing that's in there. Okay, let's dive into a couple questions about some Cub Scout camp questions here. Give me 1 second. There were a couple that rolled in. Can an adult attend a Cub camp with their scout and bring a sibling who is not a Cub Scout?
No.
Great. And here's one actually semi-related. If my spouse and I, this is more about youth protection and whatnot. Actually, let me let's do this one first. Let's go over just briefly kind of those rules again on the sleeping space. Somebody was asking also that I don't think we covered, if my spouse and I are the ones taking our kids to camp, are my spouse and I allowed to share a tent?
In I know there's I don't mean to hesitate on them. I just know that there's a complexity of what's allowed and then also when it changes too. So that's important. I think in general, um, a part in general, I think it's a good idea for um, adult males, adult females to sleep in separate quarters in general. Now, if you're both sleeping in a tent with your kids, if it's a cub camp, that would be okay. And though, so I guess separate sleeping spaces, even with spouses, is the general rule.
And let's just chat briefly about the siblings and whatnot. That let's actually go back to that slide if you wouldn't mind on the youth
Yeah,
protection one. There was a great chart there that Chris showed about sort of the a brief overview, little rules, because someone was asking about siblings and such. And so this is a great. If you want to go over that just one more time, I think that's really great to emphasize.
sure, sure. So notice there's distinctions between cubs and basically meeting the needs between kids and their parents and cubs, and then older developmentally Scouts BSA have different rules. So parent and child may share a sleeping space in cubs, but may not in Scouts BSA. And for everybody, like with if if the kids are more than 2 years apart, they need different sleeping spaces. And that's both Cubs and Scouts BSA. And that even if they're siblings, more than there may not be more than 2 years apart. Shower areas, we have protections there with and single stall showers or designated times or spaces. And then for the male and female youth, if you, so yeah, so male and female leaders, um, um, if you have both males and females in your group, you need to have both male and female leaders. And there we go. I think, yeah, yeah, I think is that what you meant?
Yep. Oops. Yes. And I did put in the wrong. I put in the code of conduct link. I'll put the other medical log. Here's the medical log link, gang. There is one right here. So I'll put this in here in the chat, as well as the link to the health record page as well. There's a bunch of that too. So I'll put that in the chat. In the meantime, let's see here. There were some other questions regard to Cubs. Somebody asked about the pricing, and gang, the pricing does vary depending on the dates. So you might want to check the camp portals page or go to cpcbsa.org and go to the reservations page, and you can see the actual cost there because it does vary by week and whatnot. Question about Cub Scout camp again. Do adults at Cub Scout camp have to be registered adults?
No, they do not. Well, each pack needs to bring their 2 registered adults, the minimum of 2 registered adults. However, other adults who come along do not need to be registered because it's less than a 72-hour experience. And camp is meant, Cub Scouting is meant to be a family-friendly activity where the whole family can participate.
And in that regard, or similar, is can lions come to Cub Scout camp?
So please email me that one. So if someone is a lion, I know for sure if someone's a lion right now, by the time camp comes along, they're officially graduated from lions. So now they're tigers and they can come to camp. I know that for sure, to Cub camp, only with their adult leader. I'm sorry, only with their parent. That's lions and tigers. Oh, lions and tigers may come with their parent. Now, I need to double check on the lions rule. If they're a brand new lion, they just joined, say June 1st. I'm not 100% sure on that one. So please send that question to that 492.camping website and we'll get it sorted for you.
And someone asked about the siblings and ages, saying that their last time they took YPT that the age did not matter if they were the same sex siblings. But here on your chart, it is that 2 year, can't be more than 2 years. Is that correct?
Right. Yeah, that is correct. That it does matter if there's more than 2 years between them, siblings or not, they can't stay in the same sleeping space.
Great. Let's see here. So yeah, that's a good, and it's a good general rule anyway, the 2 year piece. There's a variety of reasons, actually, I think, in that regard too, which I heard from someone in terms of the scouts working together as in their sort of age category and things like that, and building relationships and things too, which is great, building that teamwork and whatnot in their patrols and all of that. So someone did ask, back to a medical question quickly, is there a vaccination policy?
No. Well, no. We want to know what vaccinations everybody's had, but there is not a vaccination policy.
Great. Let's see here. Someone asked, how are the sleeping, I wonder if they're asking about sleeping arrangements. You want to talk a little bit about kind of where the kids sleep? There's been a lot of construction going on and things like that at camps, and so it might be nice to kind of go over that just briefly.
Sure. Most of our camps have, I'm trying to think if we have any pictures of that in here. A mini deck is the sleeping spaces that we have, which essentially is a shed sized sleeping space with a cot on a door in the front, a canvas door in the front, and a bunk on each side, on left and right as you come into it. That's the main sleeping space that we use at our camps. Butte Creek, it's all mini decks. Meriwether, I believe, is all mini decks now. I think the last site got switched over. Baldwin is an exception, and I will say Pioneer is also an exception. Baldwin has a couple of mini deck sites, but is primarily large canvas tents over a wooden frame without cots inside. And Camp Pioneer, same, large canvas tents on a wooden frame without cots inside.
Great, thank you for that.
Mm-hmm.
Let's see here. There are some specific questions about some programs like Camp Baldwin offering rock climbing, things like that. And I think you mentioned that a lot of those details, everybody should tune into their camp-specific webinars that are going to be happening, because those questions will get answered there, because things may still be in flux and things change and whatnot. And so those camp-specific ones, really attend those, gang. They're going to be great. You'll get to meet your camp directors and whatnot and hear more about the exciting things that are happening specifically at that camp.
Right. And I think, Chris, I'm going to put a series of emails here in the webinar chat for everybody. And so essentially you can email your camp managers directly. Some of our camp managers are professional scouters, but they're full-time at being professional scouters and supporting their packs and troops right now. But many of our camp managers are volunteers right up until the day camp starts. And so be a little patient with them as they get their details out, responses back to you. They're generally pretty quick, but that's part of the reason we've developed these camp portals, is to get some of those nuts and bolts details about camp on those camp portals. And so I'll put the emails in the chat here, and I bet you'll be able to tell which one is which as I put them in here.
Great. Somebody, actually, I can answer this one a little bit. Somebody asked, do all adults, parents at camp need to have YPT training to attend camp, and does an adult have to be registered to get YPT training? You do need to be registered, correct, to do YPT?
Nope, anybody on the planet can take YPT. Nice. Yep. So you can require it for your pack or troop, even though that's not necessarily it's only a requirement for adults staying more than 72 hours at camp. You can require more than that as a pack or a troop. It's okay to require more as a pack or a troop.
And it's generally, I think, a good idea. It's good for any parents attending, and so I'm a scoutmaster as well, gang, and I think it's really important because then everybody understands the rules, and it's good for everybody to just get more and more familiar with it. The content does change occasionally, and they're always working on improving it, and so it's a good thing. And getting that YPT certificate and having that at the ready for next time you go to camp or whatnot, because like Chris said, it's all going to be required here in September anyway. So a good idea to do that. Let's see here. Oh, somebody asked a question about sleeping pads, things like that. If you wouldn't mind, while I'm going through more of the questions here, if you can give like a quick little synopsis of things that maybe, especially adults, if you haven't been to camp before, even though on the portals and whatnot, I'm sure there are lists of things to bring. But in general, if you
Yes.
wouldn't mind explaining kind of like, if I've never been to camp before, kind of what do I need to be prepared for in terms of gear and things like that?
Yeah, yeah. Let me do something slightly different than answer that, Chris. Not because I don't want to, but I want to help people. Better to teach a person to fish. So I want to switch my screen up here to to an example camp portal, and which I just happen to have right here pulled up. Oh, it's okay. Yeah. Is that showing up okay?
It's great.
Yeah, okay. And I want to point out some things about that specifically here. So there are, what is in each campsite? You will find that at each camp portal, because it does vary some. So I can't tell you exactly at your campsite what will be there, because that might be different from you and the next person. I don't want people to generalize that all camps have this. So each camp has gone through and listed what they have. For example, here, this is at Baldwin. Wood platform bunks do not have sleeping pads. That's great information to know. And there's that. And then also, where is the packing list? The packing list here on your camp portal. And this is great. Share this with you, the parents and the scouts who are coming. We're packing list. Open, open, open. There we go.
It may be opening in a pop-up window, so we may not be seeing it, but
Or you're not seeing it?
no, I think
Shoot.
you'll have to show that other screen. But
Oh,
suffice it to
okay.
say that information is there. And gang, there are a bunch of questions kind of floating around in here about the webinars for each camp. The camps themselves will be sending out emails correctly,
Yeah, yeah.
correct? And it'll be listed here as well on the camp portals. The portals have everything in there. There's literally like the weather and
Right,
all of that.
right. Yeah, exactly. And for example, you'll see this is one example. This is Base Camp Baldwin, but it lists here about the pre-camp leader meetings. And so when you can expect to see those and how you access those. So there is the main one that's on May 31st for everybody. Let's get those details out there and questions you might have about this. But there's anything on this portal from the menu, and that may not be 100% up to date as of today, but it'll be up to date shortly, and schedules and all that sort of thing. Yeah. Maps of camp. How do you drive to the camp? Where's the troop roster form? This is the special needs form, and I think, let's see if I can. I don't know if is that showing on the screen, Chris?
Yep.
Okay, yeah. So there's a lot of information about the special needs there and how that works, and vehicles and food and all that sort of thing that answers your questions related to all those different sorts of special needs. And you can send that form. This one here, I should type special needs form before I share it. There you go. That's a special needs form. But again, know that this is on each and every portal so that you have easy access to all this key critical information specific to your camp. And then all the general forms are there too. We tried to rake them all into one big pile so you have everything in a easy to find place. This webinar will be posted to the portals as well, so that you'll have access to that if you have questions afterwards. You can see that there's contact information of who and how to contact people. about your additional questions that aren't answered by the camp specific questions, especially on the portal. So there's that. Scrolling down, I want to recognize a couple other questions about shooting sports permission form. Some states have that as a requirement. Oregon does not. You do not need a separate shooting sports permission form for summer camp. If you're coming to camp in July and a form is signed July 1, 2022, is it good? Technically, it is good. What's better is having one from the current year because health conditions change. So technically, if it's the same month of the next year, it's still good. It extends to the end of that month, but better is to have them every year. There's confusion about the payment date that we have caused in the FAQs on CPC-BSA. It says June 1st. That's the deadline for early payment for the trading post credit. For Scouts BSA, it is May 1st. I'm sorry for that confusion. We will fix that. That is important. That's an important miss. However, June 1st was the exception last year, still in the tail end of COVID considerations, that we pushed that deadline back to June 1. And I'm sorry that did not get fixed before today.
Looking for it now. This is where I can fix it. Awesome.
Yeah, thank you, Chris. Appreciate that.
Let's see here. There was still confusion on the married couples thing. I'm actually looking for the exact answer for that.
Okay, thank you.
Right, there we are. There was something else. In the meantime, there was something, the registering webinars, we talked about that.
There's a couple things unrelated to summer camp, but there's David mentioned in here that heard that PAC organized camping is limited to only one night. That's my understanding as well, that's correct. So that's if you're a PAC camping on your own, that it's limited to one night in the council approved locations, which doesn't necessarily mean council properties. That the councils often approve other sites. It's a little off topic for tonight, but just to get clarity on that, merit badge in September, I mentioned in this September that all adults going on overnight outings with Scouts BSA troops must be registered. They must be registered in a paid position. So merit badge counselor would not count. Joe, you mentioned that in your question. Thank you. And Robert, too. Sleeping pads and beds are not provided in any of our camps. The cots that are in there are plywood, so you'll want to bring a sleeping pad for sure. The May 31st webinars will be recorded so that you'll have access to those if you're not available on that night. And you can always email the camp directly about camp specific questions. And don't wait till May 31st. It's okay to email them sooner. And certainly check out the portals, because that's where you'll see you'll have lots of chances to talk directly with the camp leaders ahead of camp. If you change or reduce your number, if you add or reduce scouts, Tentaroo automatically updates to that, and your balance updates. Any questions with that 492.camping address that I've been sharing should go to there. I've got a teeny tiny screen that I'm sharing on here. I'm trying to think if there's anything else key on here before I go away from the thing. I should look, you know what I can do it here I want to give people a visual of what a mini DAC looks like. And I believe here on Meriwether's site, campsites. Well, that's kind of a long, tiny view at the top of the screen, but let's see. Campsite photo gallery, Camp Meriwether. You can see, oh gosh, you can share pictures of these with your scouts and adults. Oh man, that's tiny.
But there are walkthroughs, so everybody can see what it's like. It's pretty great.
Yeah, there's lots of pictures on Meriwether's portal of the actual campsites. You can see. Oh, I don't know. Is this showing? It's popping up
Yep.
slowly.
It's showing slowly. There we go.
Yeah, so you can see in this picture that, and you can look around a little here. You can see there's a plywood bunk. There's a little shelf in the back there. And these have proven to be more durable. And you can see the canvas door that's been pushed out of the way there. And you can see that on the mini deck across the way there. So it's pretty much put down your sleeping pad, put down your sleeping bag, and you're good to go inside. And then the canvas door provides the privacy. All right. That was that. While I was here, I was hoping that I could maybe show you the shower houses to give you a picture of that as well. People are concerned sometimes about the outhouses. Is this showing, Chris, or is it
It's showing. Yep. Our
good?
fancy new shower house.
Yep. And every camp except Pioneer has these new shower houses complete. So it's got the shower, it's got the toilet, it's got a little heater, which doesn't keep it toasty warm, but it keeps the pipes from freezing. And the sink. There's all the amenities. It's pretty darn nice for a scout camp. And then the door, the locking doors on each stall, each individual stall.
Great.
Good. All right. Let's see.
There is a question about if you are a law enforcement officer that is required to carry a firearm at all times. How does that work?
Yeah. So that's important. That would be let's be in communication, please, with your camp in advance, because we'll want to make sure that is all. That's not a surprise once camp starts. I appreciate you mentioning that, and we'll figure out how to make that work for everybody.
Great. And on the special needs part, is there when do we need to follow up about special needs? Who is the contact for that? And a process, I guess, for special needs forms.
Yeah, thanks for that. Typically, the follow-up is a couple weeks before your arrival. That's the norm. Now, if it's a very basic, straightforward special need, like I need gluten-free diet or something like that, that you may not get a follow-up or confirmation or anything like that, but everybody gets that, either that 2-week call or the webinars to be able to get that squared away. Either or. So we call you ahead of time, or if you've already come to a webinar and ask the questions that you need and all that, then we consider that squared away.
Great.
And that's
Go ahead.
Oh yeah, because at this point, nobody's at camp yet. Everybody's still building program and hiring staff and training the staff and getting additional training themselves, making sure that everybody's set to go on that. So then the specific questions and making sure we've got what you need is handled as we're gearing up to get the ordering and stuff squared away.
Great. And let's see. Oh, somebody from out of council asked if we are coming from out of council, where would we get the adult/scout roster of scouts and adults attending the session?
Thank you. If you're coming, that's a great question. If you're coming from out of council, you get your roster from your council and bring that with you of everybody who's registered. And then for who's attending from your troop, that's that separate roster. So that's the 2 list, who's actually there and then who all is registered for your group. It's on the portal. That was one of the forms there, was the troop roster.
Oh, and kind of another piece on from a roster perspective. Can two adults split the week with one adult being there one at a time? Can adults kind of go halvesies on weeks?
Yes. Yes. The crucial part would be making sure we've got the coverage of the two registered adults. And the emphasis on registration is simply that I mean, a registered adult has gone through the training and made sure that that's all that they understand the requirements of being an adult leader at camp.
Yep. And it is a great opportunity, gang, for families parents who don't want to go the entire week, can't take that time off. I really love it. We encourage it with our troop because I love having new parents come and see camp, and splitting time is just really a great way to do it. And it's pretty doable and easy. So it's a great way to introduce folks into camp.
Oh, that link isn't good that I just put. I mean, that's the right address, but it doesn't have that www
Yeah.
business up front.
Gotcha.
I'm guessing you already put that in there, Chris, somewhere.
Yeah.
Okay.
The other one, somebody was asking, let's see, is it $100 to come to camp the night before? Is that just the general fee?
I'm sorry, Chris, could you say that one more time?
Is there the fee that was for coming the night before camp, was that only for out of council folks? And it's $100 if I remember correctly.
Yeah, the $100 fee is for people traveling further than 250 miles to camp who need to arrive early. Those travel arrangements of planes, trains, and automobiles, particularly planes and buses, I guess, can be extra challenging. And so we're working to be flexible for that, to allow troops to arrive ahead of time if that's a necessity for you.
That are coming from 250 miles or further. So it's not for other units that are local to be able to come in and
correct. Correct. Yeah.
Great.
And to be clear, at this point, that early arrival doesn't really include any amenities except for here's your campsite, and they'll probably check you in early, make sure your forms and stuff are squared away, so you don't have to mess with that the next day. But the whole point of it is to just make sure you've got that flexibility to have a place to be, and don't have to like go find a state park in the middle of summer or something like that.
Yeah. Let's see. Someone asked back to the mini decks and things like that. Do any campsites have the larger mini decks or the larger Adirondacks anymore? Okay.
Yes,
so
thank you.
Still
Thank
are
you,
a few
Chris.
of those.
Only at Camp Merriweather, there's a couple of campsites that still have the larger ones. And as far as I know, that 2-year rule applies all over the place, including the larger ones that sleep 6 people or 8 people. Yeah, and you can and should bring some extra tents to allow that sleeping flexibility. Exactly.
Last year we stayed in a site and had the larger Adirondacks, and we stayed with another. Our troop is smaller, and so we shared with another troop, and so it was great. It ended up being great. We had the older kids in one and the youngers in the other one, and they got to meet each other and hang out and stuff. So that was pretty fun. Somebody did say that they found in a multi-person sleeping quarters that even married couples should sleep separately, but in a private tent where no one else is in there besides a couple married folks can tent together. But you know what, gang? What we'll do is we'll put this into an FAQ just so it's clear. We'll make sure we find the exact answer for that. So we'll just put that on hold for now. But that does sound correct. And in terms of the larger facilities, but for the most part, we're all staying in the mini decks, which are only 2 people. So just as an FYI on that.
Yeah, thank you for that, and apologies if I've misquoted. We'll get that clear.
Yeah, great. And I think that's pretty much. I'm just going through here. I think we've gotten all those. Let's see. Did you answer the shooting sports question about that whether or not we needed to bring extra forms for that?
Right. No extra forms are required. Some states do require that, and Oregon does not.
Great. And somebody asked, we have a camper who is coming as an adult leader who is a recent Eagle Scout. How much does he pay? Is it Scout or adult fees?
Say that one more time. Adult
If
leader,
a
somebody
if a
who's
if a kid's if an Eagle Scout is now 18 coming as an adult, they pay the adult fee, right?
correct.
Correct.
Yeah, they're not doing the merit badge classes or all those kind of things. They're coming with an expectation of acting as an adult leader. Yeah,
Great.
which is an important distinction for other things like sleeping spaces, right?
Exactly. Let's see. I think. Here's a cool question. Do Webelos going to base camp pack in their gear like the Scouts BSA Scouts?
Um, my understanding is yes. So last year was our first year of that, and the intention is the Webelos base camp is I'm super passionate about that one. The whole goal of it is to get our Webelos comfortable with all those about the main attraction of Scouts BSA is all these great outings and stuff we get to do. Help them feel comfortable when they get to the troop. That's like, yeah, I know what I'm doing. I can find my way around. So we want to make it. We want to help them to become comfortable on it, so that's a process, right? So if there's a little bit more gear that has to be driven in, well, okay, well, maybe there's some flex there. You'll want to ask the camp director specifically about how they plan to manage that, but just speaking about the program as the intent of it, that's a great free camp activity is how do you pack your pack, and how do you bring it in, how do you make sure stuff's I remember my my son's first Cub Scout camp, and they tried all the Cub Scouts in my group tried to pack their packs, and there was a trail down a downhill slope going into camp of sleeping bags and water bottles and everything falling off the packs on the way into camp, and it was joyful and hilarious, and a minor challenge that they were all able to overcome, but right away it gave them this introduction of, okay, well, I've got some stuff to pick up on, and they could learn how to do it in a safe place and in a place where they weren't feeling embarrassed about that because it was happening to everybody. There were no exceptions. So yeah, so hopefully we can get them prepared some to hear some things. So much of that, we've been taught to do this, and now we're actually going to try and do it, and you figure out, oh gosh, I should have listened to that, or I could have learned to do that a little better. That whole process is just such a key to the growth that we see our kids doing in scouting. Is there's value in those things we succeed at and those things that don't quite go the way we hoped.
And for adults who cannot pack gear in due to back injuries, are they allowed to haul gear in another way, like a wagon or vehicle, that kind of thing?
Yeah, so each camp is a little different that way, in this way. It's not that not a lack of concern about back injuries, but we each have a little different way because of the layout of the camp. Like Camp Pioneer, I mean, it's small, but yeah, a wagon or something like that is totally fine. Vehicles don't get to drive into Camp Pioneer. It's just not appropriate for vehicles. Um, it's the way the road is just you can get around the road just barely if you have the know-how, but it is just very precarious. So yeah, we help. We help when there's a scout is helpful. We'll help you get the gear, and most of the other camps and Scouts BSA camps, the troop gets a vehicle to bring in to drop off the gear and then leave. So yeah, so no vehicles stay in camp during the week. Nobody wants to look at a bunch of vehicles around camp. You're not there for that. You're looking at the trees and the mountains and that stuff. Okay.
Here's a question about classes. Do we need to pay for merit badges, or are they included in the price?
Most are included in the price. There's exceptions like, say, horsemanship class at Camp Baldwin. There's exceptions. There's a few exceptions, and those would best be directed at the specific camp and the specific badge. Usually it's when there's a significant amount of extra supplies that not everybody's getting. And there's activities that are some extra, a few activities that are extra fees, but again, they're not the main bulk of camp. Your camp fee covers the great vast majority of everything you do there.
Great. And somebody asked about if adults were sharing, I missed this when we were answering this before, but when adults are sharing a week, how does that work? Do they just register for one adult and then they split it up on their own?
Yep. Yeah, so yes, exactly like that. So both adults would appear on the roster, and you just write next to their name, you would write Monday, Sunday to Wednesday, and then Wednesday PM till Saturday next to the other one. And so it'd be clear that you're sharing the time and you pay for one adult. And if, yeah, and if there's somebody there for just a couple of days, they can pay by the day. But they still need to check in. They still need to, it's paying for your meals and that kind of stuff.
Great. And I just added the camp roster form. It's a fillable camp roster in the
Oh,
in the
thank you.
chat, gang, so you guys can grab that. It's a PDF. It's fillable PDF. Really easy. Nice to do before you get there. It does say 2022, but that's all right. I'll
Yeah.
get that changed, but it works.
Yeah.
Somebody asked about where do we leave if we're driving from out of town, where do we leave our vehicles?
Great. Yeah. So each camp has a parking lot. Camp Pioneer has a teeny tiny parking lot. Camp Merriweather has a great big vast parking lot, but also a lot more people. But there's plenty of room for parking at most camps except Pioneer. Hey, there's one piece I mentioned when we talk about scheduled arrival times. I was just realizing that this was a slip. When we talked about scheduled arrival times, a great strategy, a strongly recommended strategy, is to have a meetup spot just short of camp where your whole troop or pack can meet up and make sure, okay, everybody's here. Nobody stopped at Dairy Queen is going to show up a half hour late, and then show up together as a pack, as a troop, because it's only when you're all there as a pack or a troop that we can check in as a pack or a troop and get you through everybody through their med checks, no lingering, no dangling participles there.
Great. And
Question
so,
about a small trailer going into Merriweather. Yeah, the road is fine for people bringing a small trailer. Both the vehicle and the trailer leave camp is just have a time to unload and then leave camp.
I'm digging through the questions here. I think we have pretty much answered them. Gang, go ahead and toss in any other questions in there if you have them. And let's see. There are a variety of questions about merit badge counselors and things like that, and adult dues and things. We're actually going to be doing have more information on merit badge counselors and things like that. There's a bunch of emails and things that will come out for folks that are merit badge counselors, so just watch for that.
Right. So yeah, and when you're bringing kids to camp, you'll want to have two people who are paid leaders in their position, who are you want the as your primary leaders in your troop. In particular, that's important to have. You want people who've got the experience and who know what they're doing, either through training or their position and such. Yeah, good. Well,
I don't know if you answered this one, just real quick here. If we needed to reduce the number of scouts, do we update it in Tentaroo and our balance will update automatically, or do we still need to fill out a refund request?
yeah, you should not need to fill out a refund request if you're doing that, if you're taking care of that now. The best first step is you can, yes, do it in Tentaroo. There are times when the reservation gets locked because it's past the deadline in Tentaroo, so that it has to be done manually from the office once we pass a deadline. So that email of 492.camping@cpcbsa.org is any camp registration questions. That's the best place to go to get you sorted out and get your numbers adjusted. And they'll walk you through that.
And somebody did ask about how the merit badges will be tracked this year. Is it blue cards or software?
Merit badges are tracked via grid sheets that are posted daily. So the merit badge counselors track the attendance and the requirements that are met to that point, and post those daily in a central location in camp. That's again for Scouts PSA. Just don't want to confuse any Cub Scout leaders who are out there like, what are you talking about merit badges and grid sheets? So the adult leaders can check in on their Scouts progress there.
Great. All right.
How'd we do?
I think we're good. I think we are good. I'm looking through these and I think we've answered. Again, gang, you can send emails to the 492 camping email as well, of course, at any time. And just check out those camp portals, like Chris was saying, they really are fantastic, and they're continually being updated with the latest and greatest. And so there
Yeah,
you go.
and you'll be invited to those camp specific webinars for sure. And the times and links and all that will be posted on the camp portals. So you'll have opportunity there and communication about those camp specific questions. You'll definitely want to ask them of the specific camp, because there's slight variations between Cubs and Scouts BSA, and slight variations camp to camp based on their physical locations primarily. I want to share with you that we've got our staffing. So many camps around the country are struggling so hard with camp staff recruitment. And yeah, we struggled, especially last year. This year, my gosh, we've been working at it so hard, and we've found camp staff. And I want to thank those leaders who have referred their scouts to be on camp staff, because that has been a huge blessing as we built our way up toward camp here. It's just been a wonderful thing to see happen, where our camp staffs are filling back up to the levels that we like them to be. And so now the hard work of making sure the staff is trained and ready for your arrival is firmly in our focus. And there's still a few positions. If you've got scouts who are age 15 and older, age 15 can volunteer for a couple of weeks at camp as staff and training, and 16 and up can be full-time all summer staff with us. And there are a couple of weeks, especially when the jamboree is going on, where some of our staff are zooming off to the jamboree. And so there's a couple of weeks in particular where camp staffing will be a little stretched, but we'll be good. We'll be good. And I guess finally, my gosh, thank you so much for being a scout leader. It's harder than when I was a Cub Scout leader. It's harder than when I was a scout leader with my son's troop. And wow, it's so much. It's harder for lots of reasons. I won't even go into those, but I'm grateful. And that's, I think, the important piece there. There's a lot of rules and regs and all details of making these things happen, and we could not do it without you. So thank you for the time that it takes, and for your time tonight to get prepared. Keep on those portals, and keep checking out that thing, and refer the troop and pack parents and your scouts to those portals so they get their questions answered and know what they're going to see when they get to camp. Each one's as beautiful as the next, and I'm grateful we get to share them, all of us together. Hopefully we see you down the trail there at camp.
Awesome. Yeah, thanks, gang, for joining. Really appreciate it. And there was a question about blue cards. Did we answer that about final merit badge reports? You mentioned the grid sheets. I know that.
Oh yeah.
So the kids still need to bring blue cards for merit badges for Scouts BSA camp when they actually go to the classes.
Yes. And that's a great way to prepare, is have the scout do their planning and get their approval to take the merit badge from their scout leader and get the blue cards completed. We have plenty on site, but it's really great to show up with that set up already. And then at the end of the week, the completed blue cards or the partial blue cards are all returned in an envelope for your troop. Again, that's Scouts BSA. Cub leaders, don't worry about those.
Great.
Yeah.
All right, gang. We'll keep watching your email for emails from your camp directors and whatnot for the camps that you're going to. Check out the portals, dig around and play in there, because there's photos and sort of virtual tours and all that kind of fun stuff. And so we're super excited for you all to come to camp, and feel free to check out the portals for the other camps in case you want to go to those ones next year, and feel free to share it with the scouts, and because it really is fun to see the different camps. And if you've never been to Camp Pioneer, check it out. It's pretty cool. If you've never been to Meriwether, check it out. It's really cool. So that kind of thing. It's really fun to see the differences and whatnot. And they are we are really, really blessed and lucky to be able to have all of these camps. It's really fantastic. And it's so great to have all of you here. And we just can't thank you enough for attending and listening and asking questions. And we look forward to the next time. We will again have another of these webinars too. So feel free to join in or tell your other families, other parents, they are welcome as well. They don't have to be leaders. They can just, you get a lot of questions from a lot of people, and it's just great to, especially new parents, to feel comfortable about coming to camp. You know, are my toes? Do I have to worry about my toes getting eaten by squirrels? You know, things like that. Always, no question is a crazy one. So because we've heard them all, I'm sure. But anyway,
Yeah.
so feel free to join us. That'd be super awesome. All right, gang, thanks so much. We'll post this. There will be a recording. It's being recorded right now. We will post the recording here shortly. So that will be available to anybody who wants to watch as well. And we look forward to seeing you all next time. Any other thoughts, Chris? We're good to go.
I think we're good to go, Chris. Thank you for your time too tonight, helping us stay on the straight and narrow, getting these questions answered.
Oh, my pleasure. All right, gang, thanks so much and have a great night. We will see you on the trail. Bye-bye.